Vancouver is located on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. In 2013, the Vancouver City Council formally acknowledged that the city was founded on lands that, quote, were never ceded through treaty, war, or surrender, 127 years after Vancouver was founded. Where Are We in the World features sites around the Lower Mainland shaped by often ignored or hidden histories of struggle and agency.
Our history was told about Komagata Maru in two lines. 376 passengers came in, they were in Vancouver for 2 months, and they were turned back.
Most people continue to have a very notional idea of what the event was, that it was a ship carrying 376 would-be immigrants from British India. Most of them were Sikhs, all of them were Punjabis, and the ship was turned back.
Much more needs to be done to share that with people. I think that these are issues that can be great learning tools in our schools. Very much so, and when I went to high school, I never knew about the Komagata Maru. I live in the city of Vancouver, never learned about out-residential schools.
I think it's more relevant today than yesterday. As it sailed out to sea, it became a forgotten piece.
Step inside the shoes of those 376 passengers and really understand the psychology of it. So they take this 2-month-long journey, and as we've seen, we see this gorgeous shores of Vancouver, of Burrard Inlet, and they are not allowed to land on those shores. So it's like there's this distance between them and the shore. And then, so after a 2-month standoff, they're sent back for another 2-month-long journey back to where they came from.
The enforcement of the continuous journey regulation from 1914 until 1948, when it was finally rescinded, was even more extreme than the Chinese Exclusion Act.
100 years ago, my great-grandfather, who I knew was alive, and he'd be able to tell me about what had happened. When those that were aboard the Komagata Maru came, they were not welcomed in the way our people would have welcomed them. I feel that we, as the Musqueam people, should have been and have always been on the front lines of welcoming people to our territories.
The Komagata Maru, like any history, can be engaged with from multiple perspectives. It really is not an event that can be claimed to be one or the other. It exists in its multiplicities.
I agree. I think there are different narratives emerging, because I think the Komagata Maru narrative has been a male-based narrative because it was all about 376 men. But I think what we have done in the play that we'll be airing, we have brought women's voices in. We also need to have children's voices that say, our fathers went out to fight for, to go to another country and create a home for us, but we were left behind and our fathers came back unfulfilled. So I think there is a recognition that although this was a male story, it was a gendered story, but at the same time that women had a voice.
How do we use the Komagata Maru as a linchpin moment to tell the story of other narratives? So how does the Komagata Maru link to the right to vote, linked to stories of gender, linked to stories of immigration and labor movements and arts and culture? And that's the connection we need to make, as opposed to keeping the Komagata Maru in a silo of 1914. How is it relevant to 2014?
I noticed today that there are 2 school groups, for example, and when I look at those children, I think that's where the importance lies, because it's a chance for us to educate young people about a piece in Canadian history that they don't learn in their textbooks.
It represents also a moment in our Canadian history to remember, to commemorate, to make memories, to make sure that we don't forget what happened in the past.
ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਦੋਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ politically back home, they fought for freedom of India, and they role model for the community that we should fight for our rights.
So the history of the Komagata Maru exists within the context of the British Empire. It exists within the context of the larger Sikh history, South Asian and South Asian diasporic history in Canada.
It's a human rights issue, and when I look at the Komagata Maru incident, the Japanese Canadian internment, the Chinese head tax, the First Nations residential schools, all these events are interrelated.
What happened 100 years ago in that incident was part of a broader white supremacy and anti-Asian political organization that shaped Canada and British Columbia in general.
We always are very proud of the fact, and rightly so, that Canada is comparatively a much better place to live in the world. But at the same time, if you look at the history, we have in the past, and it continues to be in some ways, racist policies that try to keep non-white people out of this country. The things have changed to a point that now you hear things that the federal government has apologized, and the BC government is apologizing and declaring a day in the name of Komagata Maru. It becomes a sort of something that the politicians can use to forward their own sort of agendas.
The people on that boat were soldiers. Some of them were soldiers, and they fought for the British Empire. And here they are coming to Canada thinking that they would be welcomed, and they weren't. And when it comes to a soldier being not respected and honored in that way for their sacrifice, that's something that says a lot. I think that's what really makes it even more tragic. We never forget our past, and on our uniform is a representation of that history and the sacrifice that was made. And so that's what the real relevance is. You cannot forget the past. You must learn from it so that you can have a better future.
ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਚੇਤਾ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਆਏ, ਕਿੰਨੀਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੁੱਖ ਤਕਲੀਫਾਂ ਝੱਲੀਆਂ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਆਏ, ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਰੂਟਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਜੁੜਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਸਕਸੈਸਫੁਲ ਹੋਗੇ.
The elders should share their experiences, and we as the youth, we should ask our elders to tell us about their experiences, because that's the way we're going to learn, right? And we wouldn't want to not know about what our elders have gone through and then we just disrespect them.
We need to sit with our elders, our parents, grandparents, and hear stories about their parents, their grandparents, because those stories are getting lost each and every day.
We are not in this fight alone. That we must not feel that only South Asians suffered at the hands of the colonists or people who first came to Canada, that there are all kinds of people in the world who still suffer and who have suffered injustices in the past.
The government of Canada and the province of British Columbia on separate occasions have apologized for events that have occurred that have been somewhat of a detriment to the minority ethnic groups, i.e. Komagata Maru, to the Chinese head tax and legislation, to the Japanese internment camps, and the First Nations placing them on reserves and residential schools. So you've had a number of apologies, but I would hope that it would be not just left as an apology, i.e. words and only words.
But I think we need to come together to always remember that racism still exists today.
We have to galvanize and mobilize our allies in resistance to discrimination at all points. And that's the real legacy of the Komagata Maru. It's not to live and have a safe remembrance of this story of 1914 to show, yeah, 1914 happened, but let's have those difficult conversations regarding identity and racism, and let's move forward in addressing issues that still exist today so that these histories can be incorporated into the greater story of what it means to be Canadian.